Hi, Sam.
Hi, Sandy. How are you doing?
Well, thanks, and you?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Hi, everyone. Oh, it's Sam and Sandy. Just the
Hi,
two of
sister.
everyone so far.
Yes, hello.
Let's see. Foley will not be joining us today, so we'll see how many other people we get for today's session. Otherwise, we may have to let it stand over. Brian. Hello, Brian. Nice to see you.
Hi, Justice.
Okay, let's just give it a few seconds and see if we get some more people for today.
Sure.
Okay. Guys, we're 5 minutes in. I want to quickly just take there we go. Just in time, Dom. I was about to say that we're about 5 minutes in, and I don't have much by ways of tangible progress to report or how to take this forward. And without Foley, I'm not sure where our next steps are. So I wanted to maybe just check in with anybody else. Do we have anything that we want to get into? Is anybody ready to maybe just lead the discussion for us today, or should we try again when we're all together next time? How does everybody feel?
Hello. Yeah, I do have a few things to show. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
sure.
not a
Let's
whole
do
lot.
that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'd love to see it. I know you've been
Yeah.
doing lots of good work and making progress here. So yes, please
Well,
go ahead.
thank you. Hello. Good afternoon and good evening to to everybody else. Yeah. So basically, I haven't been doing much work on the Tazama Helm side. So I've set that aside because I was working more on the I was working more on the Tazama beta. But I think there's a bit of convergence. There's a bit of convergence between the two. So I was actually working with the interacting with the Tazama beta using the API. So I think that's one of
Oh,
the points we raised last year. Sorry,
yeah.
last week, right? We wanted a what is that? Uh, okay, we wanted to set up some boundaries, and so to
Perfect.
interact with that using the admin service. Okay, so I can share some of my notes here. Uh, Chrome tab, repositories. Sorry, hold on. Yeah. So in effect, this is what I've been working on. So just a few notes and some interesting discoveries. Right. So on one hand, here I was interacting with the Tazama beta using just using the APIs. But not using Postman. So I always default back to curl. So this is interesting because to me anyhow, because here I'm able to get the network map, get the rules, and yeah, I still
Maybe
haven't
maybe
written.
just to
Yeah,
quickly pause, right? Because I
yeah,
think Sam, you weren't here the last time, and maybe also just to recap, because I think this is great, right? Because we said the last time that we were going to separate the configuration as a second phase after the initial deployment, right? And then at the moment, a lot of our configuration is done via Postman, but Postman implies that everybody is familiar with it, everybody knows how to use it, everybody prefers it. And um, it was actually you, Dom, that said that, well, you don't typically use Postman, so you prefer to use curl. And I appreciate this process because curl, in theory, here is a lot more generic and available to anybody. You don't need to download an additional tool. You don't have to get the Newman CLI or whatever the case is. Curl is just curl, right? I know that some of the Linux distributions, for example, don't have it. So there's maybe even more basic option like something like wget. But I think curl is basic and generic enough to be able to say that this is accessible to anybody. And you can deliberately give people the commands that they can use. There's the tokening and everything else that can happen. So you can run your entire configuration from curl. So I just want to recap and close the gap there because I think this is actually really great. And I really appreciate that. This is fantastic. Thanks, Tom. Sorry. Yeah, I'm done now. You can, it's back to you.
Thanks for
all right.
sharing that context, Justice. Yeah,
Uh,
please continue. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this is step one, getting the configurations. I was quite happy with this one. And what's interesting here is, to me, this also showed the value of the Tazama beta because in the prior to this one, I just been working with the full stack Docker, and all I had to work on was 901, rule 901, rule 902, which is okay. It's good as far as baby steps, understanding the process, but getting this one was actually more. What you have in Tazama beta is configurations which are a bit more substantial and helps with understanding okay, the whole process. Okay, so anyway, this is something that can be tested out. Next one is I actually sent transactions to the transaction monitoring service, and surprise, it works. Okay, so this one sends the transactions, and I have some scripts here in my repo. And then next after that is Sandy queued me in because I was wondering, okay, fine, I'm able to send my transactions via API, but how do I get the reports? How do I get the alerts? Um, and so Sandy clued me in on using just get report by message, and yeah, I tested it, and it also works. And interestingly, this is the full report, right? So yeah. So this one is your normal. It's a normal transaction. I did get as far as testing a transaction that would trigger an alert. Unfortunately, my network at the office crapped out before I could push it. But that was also interesting because I then used AI to just get me the interpretation for this one. Let me see if I can bring it up here. Okay. Um, so that gave me some interesting results. So hold on, data ingest, typology reevaluation. All right, I think this is worthwhile sharing. So I hope you can give me a minute here. Entire window, this one. Yep. So yeah, out of the result that I used, it was actually, oh yeah, here it is. So this is the result of an alert. So this is all on This is all on Tazama beta. Okay, and so this is the it's quite extensive. So just decided to try it out using uh, uh, plug it into Gemini, and it came up with this one. It managed to pick up where the typologies managed to trigger.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
yeah. So anyway, as a potential process and workflow, this could also work. Yeah. So my next stage here would be I'm gonna okay. I'll stop sharing in the meantime, or I'll just keep it on screen. But my next stage here is, yeah, I've managed to pull out configuration from Tazama Beta. Um, my next question, is, can I push that same configuration to my own deployment, right? So last week I tested pushing the configuration via admin API, and I noticed that it wasn't picking up the parameter. It wasn't picking up the parameter value. So anyway, I still need to check that. So that's one. And then the other thing, also picking up from my message exchange with Sandy, is okay. I can get results using using get message by ID, but what are the other what are the other facilities? I mean, now this goes. Okay, I would step back and ask from a use case perspective. Here I am. I'm a user. I'm interactive. Power user, and I'm interacting with a Tazama instance, but my only means of access is via the admin API and the transaction. Okay, uh, should I also have access to NATs, or is that done via relays? And also, for the things that I should be able to do, what are the other things that I should be able to query using the admin API? And is there anything else? So
I think,
yeah, those are the questions.
yeah, there are quite a few things in there. So let me start at the top. If you're asking about the network map itself, right? So it would depend on whether you have all of those other processors deployed, which is the only real difference between a demo deployment or a sort of a public deployment and what we call the full service deployment. And if you're deploying the full service deployment, you can also do that off Docker Hub. So Docker Hub does have all of the rule processors published in pre-built images. So the same way that you would publish from pre-built images for Rule 901 and Rule 902, you can publish those pre-built images for the full service with all of the rule processors. And once everything is running, it's the network map that turns everything on. So each of those rule processors will have let me actually show you. I'm going to show you what it looks like in Postman.
Okay.
As soon as Postman starts up, I'm pretty sure I clicked the button.
While we're waiting for that, what is
Hmm.
the sequence of setting up network maps? Is there a sequence,
Yes.
correct sequence for doing? Yeah. Okay.
I'll show you what that looks like as well. All right. Okay. Let me do this here. So this is currently tapped in. Well, let me actually specifically tap it into our beta. I'm going to share. Okay. So, and I think what we did is Sandy shared with you basically all of the current configuration information out of the beta anyway, right? So I can't remember, Sandy, if we did that for Oh, it doesn't really matter. You don't need the tenant ID because the tenant ID is supplied by default when you load it. So I think we stripped it out anyway. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do here is to just authenticate ourselves. So let's go here to configuration management so that we can get our token. And you are going to need a specific, oh, that's interesting. That is because I'm here. Oh, hang on. Yeah, I need my credentials for the beta.
Is this Postman collection in the public GitHub repo, or is this in the private Tazama repo?
That is a good question because traditionally we've kept this in the in the private, I suppose, right?
Okay.
Because the information that we prefer to keep hidden that prevents reverse engineering of the methods that people are going to be using to commit the fraud, right? The same methods are going to be used to catch them, and we don't want people to see that. And that comes with two different components. The first is the rule processors and how they behave. And then the second thing is the configuration, which takes all of those rule processors and puts them into specific typologies in a very deliberate way. And we don't want people to see that. So yes, this is typically in the private side,
I see.
but this specific collection here has not yet been replicated back. We're using this to do the beta testing, but we haven't pushed a new version into the repository yet. So that'll happen now as part of the release 4. So we'll sort that out. Okay, so let me just quickly I'm going to stop sharing because I'm about to put like my password in here and I don't want you guys to see it. And it is typically the Tazama API client user. Let me see if that authenticates. And yes, it does. And then I can get my token and I can share this back to you guys. Cool. No. Okay, just pretend to, oh wait, no, but we're recording this. Hang on. Are we? Yes, we are. I'm going to stop sharing this again. I mean, this is only the beta system password, but it's probably better if it's not out there on the internet. I've had enough security incidents this week. Okay. All right, cool. Thank you. All right. I'm going to share up again. Okay. So the first thing that you can get here, and this is basically what we shared with you, is the information that you can get out of the system is exactly the information that you will use to put back into the system through your curl scripts, right? So if I'm fetching all of the rule information, I basically get this into an array, and this array is immediately the same array that you're going to put into the system. The system is going to ignore the tenant ID anyway, and the updated date time here should also probably be ignored. So if you want to clean this up neatly, you can probably delete these values from all of the configs that you are sending into the system. I don't think it's essential. All right. And the same for the typologies. If you're fetching the typologies from the system, those are basically the same ones that you're going to be putting back into the system. So these are all working. And if you are getting an error somewhere where something isn't validating, but you're using these particular configurations, then there's definitely a problem somewhere. I suspect the error that you're getting now is perhaps a formatting issue in the version of the configurations that you're using. If you want me to look at it, I can, but it's probably just easier to skip ahead to a version that you know is working. Right, so these are the ones that I think Sandy's already shared with you. And then there's the network map over here, and you can fetch that as well. So these are all functions that are baked into the current API, right? So the active network map here is version 1. And we have loaded a version 2 into the system, and that version, oh, we have not. Huh, okay. Oh, that's why. That's currently on a different machine. Ignore that. Okay. let's do that here then. So when you are posting this information, you're basically taking that array and you're sending it into the system. It is not idempotent, so you can't send the same one in on the same key and then it'll just work. It will create a conflict here. So if these things are already in the system with a particular value, it won't work. I think version 2 is not in the system, so this might actually work. If you're asking about the correct order of sending these things in, the rule configurations and the topology configurations can go into the system in any order. It doesn't matter because they are going to be inert until the network map deploys them, right? So when you load them, they are going to not do anything. So I can load this into the system now at any time, and they can sit in the system until I am ready to use them, right? So there's my rule configuration went up, and now my topology configuration is going to go up. I'm going to send this through. This will maybe time out. I don't know. We'll see. Oh, no, actually it's fine. Okay. And there's my topology configurations just went into the system. So these are also in the system at the moment. And they went in addition to the existing ones because the existing ones are on version 1 of their configurations. And this new set is going in as version 2 of the configurations. So now I can also post in my version 2 network map that uses my version 2 topology configurations that uses my version 2 rule configurations. And you will notice that when we send this into the system up front, we send it in as deactivated, right? We don't want to send it in as activated because as soon as we do that, there is a key in the system on that particular, well, not the active true, sorry. This is a unique key in the system per tenant. So you cannot have 2 active network maps in the system at the same time. And I really hope this is true because this is going to be embarrassing if it doesn't work. Okay, good. There we go. Duplicate key value violates unique constraint, right? So for this particular tenant, you are not allowed to have 2 active network maps. So your new network map will typically go in as false. And then it's still inert. It doesn't do anything in the system. So I can send this into the system, right? And it is now my version 2 network map that is active false, right? So now what you then need to do is at a time of your choosing, and this is particularly important in a production setting where the system is running and you want to deploy a new network map at a specific moment where you're saying, let's say from midnight or whatever the case is, at that point you want to deploy your new network map for all evaluations going forward, right? So then you do this in sort of a responsible manner. You say at the appointed time, you will activate your new version 2 network map. And that comes with a number of options. So probably the option that's going to be the most important for you is going to be the reload mode. And it's going to be a cascade mode. And this is where it gets like very pedantic in system terms. Because the system is what we are calling a forward chaining inference engine, you need to load the configurations backwards, right? So you need to load the configuration for the event adjudicator first, and then you need to load the configurations for the topology processors, and then you need to load the configurations for the rule processors, and then you are going to load the final step, which is the event director. And once the event director gets your new network map and it's activated, then it will automatically propagate through that workflow, right? So what the cascade does is it makes sure that the configuration is being deployed on the system from back to front. And when you send this into the system, you will now get the new network map that has been activated. And when this message comes back, that activation will cascade backwards from the event adjudicator to the topology processor to the event director. And now when I send in a new transaction here, I will be able to see the result that has been compiled with my version 2 network map. Right. And that all happens here from the config service. So the administration service contains all of these endpoints for configuration management. So the basic CRUD endpoints for creating, reading, updating, and deleting. In a production setting, we don't recommend that you turn the update and the delete on, because you want your network maps and your configurations to be auditable, and you want them to be repeatable. So if I am re-evaluating a transaction at any point in time, I want to evaluate it with the network map that was active at that point in time, and that gives you some kind of legal defensibility if you need to prove your system's behavior in a court. Right? So what you don't want to do is allow people to go and remove network maps and configurations from the system in production, and you don't want them to update them either. You don't want to change their behavior in flight. You actually want to implement them very strictly according to some sort of version control. Never overwrite, always create in addition to with new versions. Okay. And then some of the other endpoints that are here is the admin service has the endpoint that you just saw here, which basically fetches an evaluation result with a message ID. So you can poll the admin service to go and fetch a particular outcome. Like this one was the one that we submitted earlier, so we can keep on going to get that one back, as long as we send in the message ID that we used when we submitted it for evaluation in the first place. Then the admin service also has a range of endpoints for condition management. Condition management is, let me show you here. That one, but I need to change this. So if you're looking at the demo, for example, here, there's a lot of functionality around conditions that you can set on the accounts or on at the entity level to block or override the system's default behavior. So all of the endpoints that facilitates this functionality actually sits on that admin service as well. And then the admin service has also attracted a lot of new functionality to manage the Tazama Connection Studio and the Tazama Rule Studio. For now, those are in the admin service, along with the simulation services. But we're probably going to be moving those into a new service after the release. The admin service is getting a little bit bloated, so we're going to split that functionality out later. But that's what the admin service contains at the moment. So that was a lot of me talking, and hopefully I've answered all of your questions. Did I miss one?
I'll try it out. I'll try it out, and I'll see how it works out. Yeah, but anyway, for me, replicating a configuration from one instance to another, that's basically my next goal.
Yeah. So you should be able to say, if you want to pull out the current one, you can use this to read it. And then you should be able to take that exact same structure and put it back in as well. Just remember this rule around the active. So active should always go in as false. And you will have conflicts if you are trying to send the same version into the same system. If you're sending it into a new instance, you should be fine. So if you can pull this out of, for example, the current beta online, you should be able to submit it into your local instance almost immediately.
So the CFG, the version number that you have there, that's basically arbitrary. I mean, that's self-defined.
It's self-defined, yes. One of the outstanding pieces of functionality for Tazama at the moment is a configuration service. We actually have a configuration service that somebody built for us, but it's currently pointing at the previous Arango DB installation and also interacts with the database directly. So it doesn't use all of the API services that we had now recently built on the admin service. So the configuration service is out of date and needs to be refreshed. But we didn't have capacity to do that in advance of our current release. But that is probably the next thing that we absolutely have to complete for the community is that configuration service. And then we expect the configuration service to actually handle the configuration management. So we will apply some sort of semantical version control inside the configuration utility so that this becomes less arbitrary and is actually system enforced and managed.
Okay, got it.
Right. And then whatever you're doing, I mean, I really appreciate your approach to actually do this stuff inside curl, because I think it's a lot more universal. Postman is not, as it were, a fully open source utility, even though it's widely used in open source, but it's probably more of a freemium product. So you can use quite a few of its services for free, but if you want the really cool stuff, you end up having to buy a subscription, which is fine. But that's kind of contrary to the way that we think open source could be used by our community. So I think a curl-based approach is probably ideal and something that is far easier to script. You don't need anything for it. So I'm very excited about that process and how it turns out and how we might actually be able to leverage it inside the our deployment process here as well. Right. Thanks, Dom. I appreciate you sharing. I just want to check in with everybody else if anybody else has anything that they would like to share or like to see even.
Justice,
Yes,
you
hello.
did write really good documentation on that config service, and now I can't remember where it is. If you could just post a link for Dom.
The configuration management or?
Yes, you wrote good documentation.
Thank you, Sandy.
It
Very
was
nice
really
of you to
good.
say so. Let me find that for you quickly. We might have actually shared that in the past, but it might be worth just sending that out. Let me share here as well, so you can just look at it on the screen. So in our docs repository here, there are a number of guides, product information, and so on. I think the one that Sandy's talking about here is inside product, and it is configuration management. And there is a very large document here on how all of the configuration artifacts fit together, what they contain, what their values are, what their meanings are, and so on. So you can have a look at this here. I'm going to share this out. Let me just put it into the chat here so that anybody else who wants it can also get access to it. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to let us know. I don't know if this needs an update, Sandy. I don't think so. I think we've actually updated this since last in version 3.
Not since
It hasn't
Arango.
changed.
I think there might be one or two diagrams still referencing.
Yeah, then the only thing that might be missing here is multi-tenancy. If multi-tenancy is in here, then this is pretty much up to date.
No, I don't think it is.
Yeah. So add this to our to-do list, Sandy.
Sure. I have a whole section on updating documentation.
Yeah, so we can get back to this document, but this will give you sort of the highlights of how this is how the configurations are put together. And it'll also be a little bit more meaningful when you start using the system in production, and you'll need to start tweaking the system configuration to meet your evolving fraud trends and requirements. Okay, back to the group. Anything from anybody else? anything you're curious about while you have our attention in this intimate setting?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to this one. I mean, the configuration document you showed is quite interesting to me because that ties in with my concerns. But my question here has to do with how does this tie in with either Tazama Rule Studio or Tazama Connection Studio?
Right. That's a good question. So let me do that by picture. I have a thing somewhere. All right, let me do this here. Yeah, right. So the Connection Studio and the Rule Studio are two of the new components that's coming up for release 4. So traditionally what we have, or what we used to have, was just this. This is the Tazama core engine that we are currently deploying, and this is version 3's footprint, basically. And we have here, there's the admin service API that we've just discussed, and then we also have what we call the transaction monitoring service API. And that's familiar. You send your transactions into that service, the system does an evaluation, and then you will have NATs relays or REST relays or something out of the other end of the system to give you a response. And there's no case management system attached here, so you would connect those relays to your own case management system, and the entire system here would just function as an engine that does evaluations. You feed it data, it gives you results. The transaction monitoring service over here has 4 hard-coded data pipelines. There is a PAIN 001 and 013 pipeline, and then there is a PAX 008 and a PAX 002 data pipeline. The PAIN 001 and 013 relate to module loops quote cycle, right? So if you're familiar with the module loop system, and if you're not, you can ask Sam about it because he is here as a representative of module loop as well. But module loop has a 2-stage transaction process. The first stage is about getting a quote that the user will agree to, and if they agree to it, they then perform the transaction. So quote and transaction are the 2 stages in module loop. We have the 4 transactions that simulates that process. At the time that we built it, I think module loop by now has also implemented their own version of ISO 20022. And natively, their process looks slightly different, but that's something that we can also easily adapt to. So what we have by default and what you would have seen now in the beta program instance is only PAX 008 and PAX 002. So it says, I want to make a payment, and then the system responds with a response, whether that payment is successful or not. And all of that is handled here via the Transaction Monitoring Service API, and it compiles a data model that the Tazama core will then use for the evaluation and the transaction history. What this means is when you want to add more messages to the system, you basically have to fork the current Transaction Monitoring Service API, and then you have to add your new messages to it, and then you have to integrate it into the data model, and then you have to build new rules that goes with that particular data model and all the new data flows. So you're essentially doing a lot of additional coding work to be able to add more transaction flows to the system. So what we then built is, instead of saying that this now has to be a fork, develop, deploy process, you can handle that through what we call the Connection Studio, right? So if you want to add additional ISO 20022 messages or additional types of business event messages, like let's say, for example, you want to start tracking device fingerprints. Now you need to create a data flow that can ingest device information from somewhere as it's being collected and then can store it in the system for evaluation, right? So you would then use the Connection Studio to build up device information. And inside the Connection Studio, you would also integrate that with the existing data model. So you'd say, I'm collecting, for example, device information. and I'm now attaching that device information to the specific user who is using that device. So now I create a data structure in the data model that links the device to a particular user or even to the user's account. So now you can build a rule that says, check if the transaction that the user is making is from a different device than the device they were using the last time they made a transaction, right? Now, typically that would also be a development process, but the Rules Studio will now allow you to do that. So it will take the new message flow that you have put into the system, and it will allow you to build a rule that evaluates that particular message stream if something should change, or it can now evaluate transactions and look through the transaction into the data model and use other components from the data model, such as the device that is linked to the user for this particular transaction. So all of that information is then, the rules are then built in the Rule Studio. So the Connection Studio deploys its connections as a portable component directly into what we call the dynamic event monitoring service. So now it's not just about monitoring transactions, it is now literally about monitoring any kind of data related to any kind of business event. And this then comes into the system through that new connection that you've built. It gets packed into the data model, and then it gets evaluated with the new rule that you have built. And then you can still get outcomes into the case management system when it breaches the conditions that you have set for the typology that you have configured around that particular rule. So that's where the Rule Studio and the Connection Studio effectively comes in. The entire purpose of these things is to be able to create additional data rails and evaluation mechanisms without developing into existing components on the platform. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. But a follow-up question here is, so yeah, so I'm currently looking. What you have on screen is 4.0. So the newer components are DEMS and what is that? What's the API, right? Right. So these did not.
DP is the data enrichment API. So that is an API where you can add additional adjacent data to the system in batch. So for example, what people would typically want to use this for is if they don't have real-time feeds into the system for example, customer data or account information. For example, right, something as simple as account opening date isn't available in the system by default. The ISO 20022 messages that we ingest here at the Transaction Monitoring Service API doesn't carry an account opening date. So in reality, the system data model never knows how old an account is when a transaction is being made. And the account age is actually quite a key metric for money laundering and fraud behaviors. So in Tazama, we had to build a rule, and I think it's rule 3, or it's basically all of them, rule 1, 2, 3, and 4. And all of those rules try and make a very good statistical guess about how old the account is. And the reason we have to guess is because we don't get that information. So what a lot of people want to do is they want to actually say, I'm going to take a flat file import of my account information so that I know whose account it is and when the account was opened. And I can even on a daily basis import the account sort of balance so that I can start doing rules against that balance to check for things like account drain through fraud. So all of that information can then be ingested periodically on a scheduled basis through a flat file import, or you can fetch it from an FTP location or something like that. So the Connection Studio also sets up the data replication services for localizing data inside the Tazama data model that you can then blend with your real-time transaction data to get access to additional information for evaluation purposes. And that's what the DP does. So yes, The DEMS and the DP are the two new API services that comes with release 4.
Sorry, I was on mute. Other than using Connection Studio and Rule Studio, how else do I, you know, so how else do I interact with DEMS and with DP? It's also its own set of rules that we set up okay, in yeah, its own set of rules typologies and also controlled by the network map.
Yes, so even DEMS rules that are built through the Rule Studio builds exactly the same structure for a rule as you would do if you just forked a rule processor and built a new one out of it.
I see. Okay.
We deliberately kept that the same. So the Rule Studio actually delivers a GitHub TypeScript rule module that you can deploy as a normal rule. So the process that we are building here for the Helm charts and for Jenkins should also be able to pick up those rule modules that you have built in the Rule Studio and then deploy them into the platform in exactly the same way. There is also a deployment CI/CD process that comes with the Rule Studio. I'm not too sure what that looks like at the moment. I'm getting my first look at that tomorrow, so I'll be able to tell you after that. But in my mind, once the Rule Studio has delivered the GitHub repository, our Helm chart and Jenkins process should be able to pick it up from there. And that goes into your own GitHub, not our GitHub. That was also the intention that we had here, is because one of the things that we realized is everybody wants and needs their own rules. We have some sample rules and templated rules for things that we have learned from our experience are useful, but when you are deploying your own system, over time, you are gradually going to discover more rules that you need to build for yourself that meet your own transaction requirements, meet behaviors in your own environment, and eventually will become AI and machine learning features for your own models inside Tazama. So we can't host thousands of organizations worth of thousands of rules. So we just give you the tools, and then hopefully with those tools, you can build all of the rules that you need.
Okay, so the tools, do they need to run on the same Kubernetes infrastructure, or is just something that we can run locally? Yeah, and just push out just push out the artifacts and configurations.
That's a good question, and it also impacts the way that we want to deploy things, right? Because typically, and the beta environment kind of cheats a little bit, right? Because the beta environment actually deployed everything onto 3 different servers, but on the same change management level, right? So we didn't create what you would typically find in a production environment where you have a number of different change management layers. You're going to have a dev server or a dev environment. You're going to have a QA environment. You're going to have a UAT environment and a pre-prod environment and however many environments your internal compliance policy, your IT policy dictates, right? So everybody is different. So in theory, part of the reason why we want the Helm and Jenkins process is because we want to create a repeatable process where you can easily deploy any number of environments according to your change management requirements, right? So you can deploy a dev environment and make it look exactly the same as your production environment through the Jenkins and the Helm charts. And if you're deploying a dev environment, what we would do is if we wanted to deploy in that fashion is these tools would live in the dev environment, right? And then you would do your development and your testing and your QA, and you would deploy it to a test environment for Tazama and the Tazama core. And if you're then comfortable that the rule processors are working, you would finally deploy the connections and the rules into your production environment. So you shouldn't need the tools to also live in the production environment. You should have them running somewhere for development purposes. And that's one of the reasons why we need to split the admin service API, because the admin service API currently contains now a blend of developer-focused functionality, which is to serve the requirements of the Connection Studio and simulation services and the Rule Studio, and then also some production functionality. And that's kind of the wrong place where that stuff ended up. So we need to split it so that you can actually have a developer tools version of the admin service that supports the developer functions of these services. And you will have a production version of the admin services that supports the production interface or functionalities. So that's something that we have to do just to keep ourselves sane. In the production environment at the moment, you would just have to close off those avenues so that people don't inadvertently connect to them and start sending test data into your production environment from your development tools. You definitely don't want to do that. But yes, these tools, and then where you run it as a development environment is up to you. So you can deploy these tools on a local machine, and a single developer can then build rules in their Rule Studio and build connections in their Connection Studio, and then take that portable pack and deploy it onto a production server or a central QA server or something like that. And that's also something to keep in mind with our deployment process here for Kubernetes, is we want to be able to say, in a production environment, I don't want these, but in a development environment, I want all of these components. So at some point in our process, we are going to need to be able to select some components and not others without having to edit the Helm charts.
Okay, got it.
Sam, I realize we're almost out of time, but I know that Mojaloop also has worked on and has available a more intuitive process for deployments at the moment. It's like driven through a user interface. Is that still backed by Helm, or is that something that is completely different now?
So we have a foundational Helm-based deployment, Helm charts for everything, just as you, I think, implied. And we have tooling which builds on that. So we have a version called IAC Lite, like Infrastructure as Code Lite version, which uses these readily and automates using scripting. But we don't have like a fully UI, full user interface that gives us everything. There is a lot of commands you'll have to run. But our full IAC deployment, it does use the Helm charts, but it also uses many different things, because it's not just the Mojaloop core, but also it deploys the whole platform around it, like all the supporting tools and services. Yeah.
It would actually be really great if we could see that, maybe. Okay.
Okay.
Could we beg you for a quick demo the next time we have a meeting?
Yeah, I'll happily do that. So so do you want to have a brief overview of all the three levels, like the Helm-based deployments, IC Lite, and then the full IC, or any particular version you want to look at?
I think all three levels would really be interesting, just to see how it all ties together. Because I know we've also had our own discussions around the IAC piece and then the deployment piece itself and so on. So sort of like what does it look like when you do a Mojaloop deployment from Helm, and how do you do it? It would be really interesting to see.
Okay. Yeah, I can actually do a Helm deployment right now if needed, but the other two will need like real commitment from you to watch and see end-to-end process. But maybe we can have like an abridged, shorter version of that. Yeah.
Or maybe just like slide it for us, like on a slide deck, what it would look like,
Sure.
and where it fits into the process, I think would be fine. If the demo itself is like quite involved, it probably involves an actual deployment onto actual infrastructure. So
Yeah.
yes, Like that could be time consuming. And then if we could have a look at how you're doing the Helm, that would be really great. I think it would be useful for us. So can we do that in 2 weeks' time?
I will prepare, but I think that might coincide with our Mojoloop community event. Mojoloop MojoCon 31 is 14th to 16th. But I mean, if I don't have conflict, I can do it. Yeah.
Otherwise, the week after that is also fine.
Okay.
So let's do it the week when you don't have the conflict. Just
Okay.
for everybody else's awareness as well, that we won't be having this session next week. Our team is traveling, so we will only be back here the week after that. So we'll only be online again in 2 weeks' time. I will adjust our invitation for the session accordingly. And then, Sam, if you want to do a demo for us in 3 weeks, I think that would be wonderful.
Okay. Cool. Thanks. Is this still the end of the hour, this meeting?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I want to see if I can quickly show something. Let me see if I can find it first, and then I'll ask you for permission.
You should be able to share.
Let's see. I'm looking for a particular pipeline that I want to quickly show, which kind of shows. Okay, so can I share my screen for a second?
Yeah, you should be able to.
When you see the pipeline view. So I can show like a manual variation of this where I run the commands. But here is a CI pipeline, just as like which kind of helps me to quickly validate a release, where release meaning of the whole Mojoloop bundle. If you pick one of these lines, for example, our base version is this. So it deploys. So it has two deploys for Mojoloop. One is I think I kind of gave an overview, so we'll not go into detail now, but it deploys the backend dependencies that are required for Mojoloop, the Kafka, MySQL, Redis, and all those things. And then it deploys the Mojoloop core itself. I named it GP because it's a short for Golden Path, which is our base scenario. It has about like 2,700 tests. And then it runs Helm test command, which runs all those 700 tests. It verifies the results. And yeah.
Okay, amazing. And this is Circle CI, right?
Yeah, this is Circle CI. It is taking like a long time for me to run everything. So kind of automated this in CI. It's a cron job now, runs every day. And it takes about 20 minutes to finish, whereas like for humans to verify, it'll take like 2-3 days. And yeah, it has two triggers, which is one is it runs every night, like midnight UK time, and then any merge to main on Helm repo, it can run there as well. So and you can see like we have 8 different use cases covered here as well. For example, the interscheme FX here, the ISO 20022 variation, bulk. Yeah, all those it just runs and gives the results. And there is let me stop annotating so that I can quickly show a sample result as well. So if I go to one of these tests, for example, Helm test GP, and then I'm uploading the artifacts results here, and then you can see the full result set here, going to the details, and you can see the test result. Especially useful when something fails, you can go into the detail and it has everything there. What is the transfer test? And you can even like get a thing to run it using your favorite tool, for example, curl, so stuff like that.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, that
I'd
is
actually forgotten. Mojoloop does proper continuous deployment, continuous integration, continuous deployment, right? So whenever your code goes in, it actually goes straight into a deployed instance.
People can configure that. I know like some of our SIs have configured that, meaning like they have internal pipelines which look for updates on our public repos and check that. Mine, like ours, is at a high level still, but yeah, that would be the ideal situation that you described.
Okay. I think it's slightly, well, we hadn't considered doing it that way. We're at the moment still sort of more proposing that people should be deploying this when they choose to deploy it rather than when we make an update to it all the time. But I think even internally, we only release like once every 3 to 6 months anyway. So there's very little continuous integration and continuous deployment required on our side. What is the sort of the churn of new functionality for you guys? Does it warrant continuous integration, or is that a nice
Yes.
to have?
Yeah. I think it warrants continuous integration for sure. We're doing it here as you saw, but we are also trying to convince and make the case for our SIs and adopters to do the same as well.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, and at the top of the hour, thank you very much for sharing, Sam. At the top of the hour, that's us for today. Thank you very much, everybody. We did make, I think, a little bit of progress. There are a couple of things that I can take away here into our Helm process for us to keep as notes. But thank you, everybody. Thanks to Dom for sharing. Thanks to Sam for sharing. And then we will see everybody in 2 weeks.
Okay,
Thank
take
you.
care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.